Hey everybody, welcome. Thank you so much for joining today. I'm very excited. We've got our second guest speaker in our CIO Speaker Series. Eric Johnson is joining us from SurveyMonkey. He's the SVP CIO over there. And today's topic is going to be around business engagement. So we're really looking forward to digging in a little bit and getting a sense of how Eric does this. Some introductions. Eric is, I believe, a four-time CIO at this point. He and I have worked together in the past, and we've been in the same circles for a long time. So previously, he was CIO over at Informatica, and then at DocuSign. That's where we worked together over at Talend, and now he's at SurveyMonkey. And some other things about Eric: he loves to do international travel. He is an avid surfer. He has done the double dipsy a few times in Marin. I don't know how many times. Outdoorsman. He has a wife, 3 daughters, all within 2 years of each other. And he's living the dream here in Silicon Valley. Eric, thank you so much for joining us.
Brian, thank you so much for having me. Thanks for the introduction. You make me sound much more exciting than the current situation, sitting here at my desk taking Zoom meeting calls all day long every day. So thanks so much for having me.
Great. Let's go ahead and stop sharing the PowerPoint so we can see everyone's pretty faces. So the way we do meetings here at GitLab is we really are about discussions and not doing a bunch of PowerPoint slides and not sharing our desktop too much, because it's really one with that intimate feel of and getting a sense of just an overall conversation as opposed to PowerPoint death, as they say. So today I thought I'd start off with the first 3 questions, and then we're going to open up to the group. But in the spirit of business engagement, and I've seen you in action over the years, but I think it would be good just overall for you to give us kind of a sense of your general approach as a technology executive around engaging with the business, especially when you first come on board and you're trying to get a feel for how you can add value. So just maybe give us an overview of that.
Yeah, as you mentioned earlier, doing this, I don't know, four times now as a CIO. I think one of the first things you really do need to do is sit down and start asking some questions. I think that many IT professionals and executives sometimes jump right in and think that maybe even assume they understand how the engagement should work. I think every company's a little bit different, but one of the things that I've found is sort of a first step in that process is to sit down with the business partners. And you're going to notice the words that I use. It's not a customer, it's a partner. I feel that IT needs to have a seat at the table and needs to act as a part of the business and be a partner in the business, but not a ticket-taking organization and having this sort of customer-vendor relationship. I don't buy into that premise. And so I think the first thing, to be a partner, you need to step in and start asking some questions around, hey, what's important to that line of business? What are the goals that they have? How are they related to the overall company strategy? And then start to sit down and find areas where there's some common ground, areas where you feel that as an executive and a partner with that area of the business, you can start to formulate a plan, a roadmap of what you're going to accomplish together. And so I think really it's about understanding kind of what those goals are for the business. I think that's the very first step you have to take. And from there, you can start to build a program around, how you engage day to day to try and drive those specific initiatives and those objectives forward, how you measure success. So then you get into more of the operational part of the process. But I think until you really sit down and have that conversation, I think that you're going to struggle to be a really good partner.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I think it's one of those things where it's almost obvious, but it's harder to do in practice. In reality, like lots of times what you need to do or the group needs to do, but actually getting that muscle memory and that rigor to do that. I like the idea definitely of you and I both believe in it's a partnership. It's not a customer relationship. That doesn't mean that you don't have really good customer service like you would expect from everyone else, but it is first starts with a partnership. So that resonates really strongly with me. So I want to take it a little step further. So that's the beginning stages of that business engagement. And now you've kind of talked to the business and you're finding common ground, you're creating a roadmap, you're agreeing on value that you can create together. Tell a little bit about, getting buy-in from stakeholders. That can be challenging sometimes. And just give us a sense of like maybe where that's gone really well, and then maybe even an example where it hasn't gone so well and you've had to even lean in harder.
Yeah. I see some familiar faces on here. They've experienced some of these things with me. Rob Parker, how are you, buddy? Good to see you. And so I think the first thing is really you have to establish some credibility, right? I think many IT folks want to go into the conversation talking about bits and bytes and technical features. That tends not to be the best approach in my experience in building out that business engagement and that business partnership. It's having conversations in business terms. I think all this is a statement that I think is important. I think all IT professionals need to think of themselves as business people that use technology as a way to get solutions delivered, problems addressed, opportunities realized. And so I think if we all sort of, and it doesn't matter, I don't care what your role is. If you're a network engineer, how are you doing something to have a conversation about the business value that you bring to the conversation, or business challenges or business opportunities that are related to your area? And so I think first and foremost, you have to start to have that engagement. You need to have that conversation in business terms. And so I think that helps build credibility. People start to feel that you understand their challenges, you understand their area of the business, you understand the goals that they're trying to achieve. And I think once you do that, you start to be able to build that kind of common trust. And a little bit this is trust, right? I mean, part of the engagement is to develop a relationship and develop a common set of goals and objectives, and being really transparent with each other around sort of, hey, here's what I think we can do together. Here's maybe the priority that we think we have. And I think you get buy-in through that process because you've established credibility through the fact that you're transparent, the fact that you understand their business, the fact that you're using language that they understand. I don't know about the folks here on the call, but man, I can tell you how fast someone's eyes glaze over when I start talking about some piece of security technology down in the bowels of the company, and why I think that's important to them. Their eyes start to glaze over until I bring it up to why it would impact their business in a negative way, or why that's actually going to be a benefit to them. So Brian, that's the first one. I think getting that buy-in is really establishing that level of credibility. That's one. I think where sometimes it can be challenging is where someone has an agenda, and you may be talking to them and getting the information around how you get alignment, what is a priority for them, and maybe there's some underlying agenda that's going on that you're unaware of. Maybe that they feel that they want to be able to control the situation, control the narrative, or they're struggling behind the scenes with something. So I think where I have seen alignment challenges is a lot of times where there's a role and responsibility battle going on around what role does IT play in driving that roadmap, and what the business partner's role is. And sometimes there's a little bit of a gray area. I see sometimes that there's a bit of a conflict there, and I found myself leaning in on that situation. A lot of it is saying, okay, let's clearly define the roles and responsibilities. Let's make sure everyone's on the same page on kind of what I'm going to do and what you're going to do, so that we erase that ambiguity, and we kind of lower the stress level. We build some trust. We increase our transparency of what we're doing. And that's sort of where I found people leaning in. A lot of times I see it on the roles and responsibilities. And sometimes it can also be conflict in priorities, where people want everything to be done. And so they start to push back, saying, well, if you won't do it all at the same time, then I'm unwilling to align with you and engage with you. And I think that's a separate separate track that you need to take, which is, hey, we can't do everything at the same time. It doesn't mean we won't get to everything, but let's prioritize things, and let's establish how we prioritize things. The way that I tend to do it is, what's the thing that's going to drive the most business value? That's a great conversation. And it forces them to sort of take a step back and say, okay, well, let me think about that. And if you can have that sort of a dialogue, I think you can overcome that commitment or that alignment challenge, where it's based on maybe they have a lot of priorities and they feel like they can't engage unless everything's getting done at the same time. So I think it's this process of building that trust, but also having some hard conversations around, hey, I'm not saying no, but I am gonna ask you that we need to prioritize, because not everything is not created equal.
Yeah, I think that's great. That business priority, because we're all stressed as groups. There's no single company that I've ever been a part of where it's just an unlimited amount of people resources to get initiatives done. There's always going to be trade-offs, and I think that trying to get alignment on the trade-offs, and I like the business value. And lots of times even just having the business declare what that business value is, it kind of gets back to the what needs to be done and how it will get done. And I know that our function lots of times really should be how we're going to go about doing it. Challenging, of course. You don't want to just say agree to everything that you maybe have a viewpoint on, like what the most business value sort of initiative is going to provide the company overall.
One other thing to add to that too, that I find this is sort of I think it's a process of evolution too. I think the first one is just, like I talked about, asking questions, understanding what's important. I think the second part of that is establishing a operational cadence around prioritization and making sure that people are all aligned. And I'll tell you, one of the key things in all this, folks, is execution. You can talk all you want, but if you don't deliver, all this starts to fall apart. The engagement will very quickly evaporate. And I found this early in my career that unfortunately there's a lot of IT shops out there that talk a lot, promise a lot, and underdeliver. And so I think if you want to find a way to really destroy an engagement with partners across the business, just don't deliver or under deliver, and you'll really struggle to have that engagement, because people just don't feel you're credible and they don't feel like they can trust you. So I think one of the underlying foundational requirements in all of this is you got to deliver, right? And if you're not going to deliver, you need to be really transparent about what you're delivering and when you're delivering it. And everything doesn't always line up right on time. We all know that things happen, but I think being really transparent about that and being really, really clear in your communications on where things are is also a foundation of building that really strong engagement. And then I say the final evolution of this is then starting to get into how you measure the results. Too often the business will say, gosh, this is such a big priority, you have to do it, it's going to change the world. And you say, okay, and you sort of structure the priorities. My next response to that is, well, let's measure the results of that. Let's clarify like the value this is truly driving, and we can share in the success or we can share in the failure. But that's another thing I think many times IT doesn't do a great job of helping to measure success, and also helping to maybe sometimes share in that success, right? It's like we're behind the scenes doing all this work to help the business and that partnership get to their goals, but we don't seem to be getting any visibility that we were contributing to that success. And that's a little bit of that business partnership that I think that is that last phase of the process, which is how do you actually help measure that success and share in the success or share in the failure of that delivery. And I think that's kind of the more advanced part of that business engagement. Once you get to that level, you have a lot of trust, you have a track record, and then the business is saying, yeah, let's actually put a meter on whether we have a target or here and we have a target of over here, and when we hit that target, let's celebrate together that we achieve that. And I think that's kind of where you get to the utopia of business engagement.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that by the very nature of our business being technology leaders, I think in general the makeup of most of our employees, what kind of sort of drives technologists, they tend not to be braggarts. They tend not to be like, hey, look at me, I've done this amazing thing. And so lots of times it's sort of counterintuitive to maybe market yourself a little bit more. And I think that it is something that we as an industry actually need to do a little bit better job at. And I love the shared successes and also the shared failures. I think those are spot on. This really is a good segue into, you mentioned some other things about being transparent and maybe a misalignment of priorities. Tell me a little bit about how you how you basically say no, or, yes, but not now. And those can tend to lead to some of the more challenging conversations around, really disagree and commit. Give us a sense of that. And, if there's any anecdotes you can provide, or maybe some stories, that'd be good.
Where do I start? It's like every day. I learned, again, this is when I say this, I sound like someone that's been doing this a long time, because I have been doing this a long time. But I think what I found a long time ago was, saying, being the office of no is not where you want to be. People will just turn off, the engagement stops, people will go around you, shadow IT occurs. And so it's really about, I sort of put my consultative hat on. And I think all of us are basically consultants, really. We're internal consultants. I always tell my staff all the time, we're internal consultants. Someone could, the business could go to another provider, theoretically, if they wanted to. So it's a conversation, and acting in a consultative way. Someone comes to you with a need, a solution, a request, a problem. I always stop and take the time to hear it. I don't dismiss it. I don't say, nope, I won't listen to it. Letting people, sometimes it's just letting people have the voice and the conversation. And then at the end of that conversation, I start asking some questions in a very consultative sort of approach, which is, what's the timing of this? How critical is this? Is this a higher priority than the other things we're working on with you? And I think it's super important to have that with each of your business partners. We sort of do it by function. It's like, if I look at the sales roadmap, we have a list of above and below the line. And I don't take credit for this. This was something that folks on my team from past lives had developed, which is above and below the red line. If it's above the red line, that means we're working on it and we're actively engaged with dates. If it's below the red line, it means it's important, but it just hasn't made it into the queue to get worked on. And so I will ask the question, is it above or below the red line? People say, well, it's above the red line. I say, no problem. So what is that? What's going to come down under the red line? And so just a conversation around priorities, because as Brian said, there's only, unfortunately, I've never found the company that has unlimited resources and money. I'm waiting for that job, and I have not seen it. And so I think it's a matter of constantly having this calibration around prioritization. But what I never say is, nope, I think your idea is ridiculous, or it's not important, because you're going to turn people off real quick. Now, I get a lot of ideas sometimes that don't make a lot of sense, and I have to dig into them a little bit, and I have to consult a little bit, and I have to get people to a conclusion, so where they go, yeah, maybe that's not a high priority. So I think put on your consultant hat. If you've never been a consultant before, learn how to be a consultant. If you want to be a really good IT professional, if you have a consultative approach and really good business understanding, you're going to go far. So Brian, that's what I would say in that. Have I had tough conversations? All the time. And examples of people coming to me and they are saying this has to get done, and along with everything else, and the hard conversations usually are like, we can do all of this, but it requires more money. I mean, there's like 3 levers you get to pull, right? It's like you can things can go a little bit longer, so you can change the timeline. You can throw sort of dollars into it, or you can reduce the scope of something. But there's not too many other variables you can play with. It's kind of a simple math equation. So I always sort of use that as the conversation to say, I can do a lot more, but you're going to have to let me pull one of these levers. Which of those would you like me to pull? Right. So the tough conversation, I think it's a constant tough conversation. It's not just at my level. My staff every day are having to deal with it, probably more so than I am. And so folks here on this call, on the front lines, day in and day out, managing that engagement, those are the kinds of conversations that you're probably having. And I think I would continue to say, become a consultant, really understand what's going on and hear people out. Because sometimes you may find something that you weren't even aware of, and maybe it is a great idea, and maybe it is the priority that should be brought to the top.
Yeah, I think I love that answer. It's great. I think that it's even more exacerbated with these hyper growth companies, tech companies that we tend to all operate in, at least we have for a while. collectively. And there are trade-offs every day, because ultimately, you need to be able to articulate, why the investment is worth it. So it gets back to that shared successes or even shared failures. And one thing I love about GitLab is there is this mindset of iteration that is, hopefully you can make even faster decisions around, what we're going to do or what we're not going to do. I love that. So we've exhausted the 20 minutes of the introduction and me get to ask a couple questions. So we have some questions already listed here. The way it works here at GitLab is the people that inputted the questions will verbalize that question, and it'll be a good dialogue. So Parl is first. Parl, can you verbalize your question for Eric?
Yeah. Hey, Eric, thanks for joining us. So my question is, what are some of the key focuses for you in the business intelligence space at SurveyMonkey? And then also, how are you using that business intelligence space and thinking about like what your customers want?
So what is the focus on business intelligence, and then sort of what are we doing with that from a customer perspective? So we are doing a full overhaul. I was trained in business intelligence by a very, very smart gentleman that I work with back at DocuSign, a guy named Rob Parker. You guys may know him. He sort of educated me on all things around good data intelligence and data management. So you're lucky to have him here. We are doing a pretty big overhaul of our entire data infrastructure. We're a 20-year-old company, and it's a company that's now really starting to look at the broader enterprise. Now we have 3 product lines versus 1, and 20 years worth of data. So you can imagine there's a lot of really, really good things hidden in that data. So a big focus for us this year is overhauling our data infrastructure and really starting to get a lot more intelligent with that data. So bringing on data science and machine learning folks, starting to do some predictive analytics. And that I wouldn't say is highly innovative. I think that is something that is kind of foundational in this day and age, but really starting to build out our machine learning and data science function, and starting to actually build out, and this is the second part of your the question, is really starting to build a recommendation engine. And so we have this concept of like all of this data, if we can start to get the right machine learning, data science to actually feed what we're calling a recommendation engine, this is something we can then start to feed into different use cases across the lines of business. So it's like salespeople being able to be prescriptive, not predictive, but prescriptive, to say, hey, salesperson, based on this customer, what they've downloaded, what they're using, how they're engaging with us on the website, we now are going to tell you exactly what the next step is, and the next phone call, the next upsell, the next cross-sell, right? And so that's a very prescriptive way of doing something. It's not just giving them information for them to figure out what the next step is. It's actually suggesting, or maybe even saying, this is the next step, go do it, or even do it for them. And so we're doing that as sort of our part of our data program. So it's an evolution, but that's the ultimate goal. What do you think, Rob?
That's a great answer, Eric, especially the first part. Thanks for the call out.
Hey, Jamie, you're next. Could you also just let Eric know what your role is and where you are at in the world as well? Be great.
Yes, so I am a senior business systems analyst here. And I'm in Portland, Oregon, amid the wildfire area, but it's starting to clear up now, so that's amazing. My question is, how do you take care of your team in a year like 2020?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, how do you take care of a team in a year like 2020?
How do I take care of my team?
Mm-hmm.
That's a great question. This has been a real focus, and it's fine. Just out walking with my wife this morning before the meeting, and we were talking about work, and SurveyMonkey is starting to do a lot around this, and we're also doing a lot with our customers around. Our solution is great around gathering feedback and gathering intelligence. And one thing that we're really pushing internally, and we're trying to also help our customers realize this value, is continually polling and finding out how your staff are doing. Ask, are you happy? Are you sad? Are you getting the support you need? Are you struggling at work? Are you struggling at home? Like, what can we do to better understand where you are as an individual, and then we can start to maybe rethink the services that we're offering, maybe rethink some of the benefits we're offering. And so we're doing that as a company. And when I talk to my peers like Brian about, what SurveyMonkey can, not that you have to buy SurveyMonkey to do this, but like mental health and people's well-being, I think is being tested, right? All of us sitting on a camera day in and day out is hard. Being in pandemics and being in wildfires and I'm sure there's lots of things going on for folks, but I think it's really the answer to your question is, I think as a leader for me is really staying close to my team and asking a lot of questions to try and figure out like where they are. And some folks are struggling, candidly, and then trying to make sure that they get all the support and help that I can possibly give them, whether it be taking some extra time off, whether it be extra services that we can offer to them to sort of help them through this rough spot. And I also am a believer, and I don't know if you guys get this, but in my personality is also keeping things light. I mean, this is not the time to be so serious and so strict about every little thing you do. I mean, we've got to lighten it up a little bit, right? It's okay to smile sometimes. It's okay to joke around a little bit. It's okay to just relax and realize we're all human. Sometimes my cat jumps up on my computer. It's my wife's cat, it's not mine, but the cat jumps up on the computer. I hear kids running around behind me. It's sometimes you just have to laugh a little bit and realize that we're sort of all in this together, and we're gonna have good days, we're gonna have bad days.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question,
Daniel?
Jamie?
Yeah, I think it answers some of it. I think like a lot of companies are taking that approach. And as a data information, survey gathering company, I was curious if there was any outreach to other companies to find out like impact of, and you might find this interesting, because a lot of remote companies are like, being remote is more efficient, and when people work from home, they can output more. But then you combine this like great experiment with the idea of a pandemic, which can also hurt output. And so it's hard to measure.
Yeah, I think everyone's a little different. I think at least what we're learning, and I talk to my Brian, and we have a very large group of peers that we constantly are bouncing ideas off of. I think what we're also seeing is some people are really good working remote and working from home. Some people aren't. Some people want more interaction. People want to have face-to-face. And so what we're realizing is there's no cookie cutter approach. And especially this starts to bleed into like, one day, someday, this pandemic's over. Like, what is the new, the new work look like? What is the future of work? I guess that's the new tagline that I'm hearing. And I know GitLab, you guys have a very unique culture around how you work. And I think a lot of people are watching. Believe me, I've talked to Brian a lot about this, because you were doing this before it became fashionable. You guys were the leaders in this. And some organizations are maybe going to pivot to that because it works for their culture, it works for most of their employees. And I think at SurveyMonkey, we're finding it's a mix, it's a hybrid. We have people that are begging to go back in the office because they hate working at home. And so I don't think there's a cookie cutter approach. I think that's kind of what I'm finding.
Are any employees going back to the office? I know some smaller startups.
We have a very small trickle of people going to the office. It is not widespread. It's still very small. And we're very careful, and we control it very carefully.
Sure. Thank you. Daniel, you're up next.
Yes, thanks for joining here to answer our questions, Eric.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm a senior integrations engineer. I am Australian, but I live in Quito, Ecuador. And my question is, in your experience, how much of business engagement is, your team reaching out to business partners, and how much of it is those teams reaching out to your team? And I think some background to this is like, I don't think that you want to act like the parents in the company having to like look over everyone's shoulder and make sure they're doing the right thing or being compliant or anything like that. You want them to understand the value and also reach out when it's appropriate to the team. So I just want to get your thoughts on that. And
yeah, I think it kind of goes, but I think when I started a company, I feel that it's me reaching out a lot more. It's me having to go and really, it's probably force the engagement a little bit. to try and, because many times I'm the first time CIO at now 3 companies in a row. And so they've never dealt with a CIO before. The IT organization maybe was a bit of a loose tribe of groups that sort of operated, but they didn't really have someone that was like, we're going to drive this direction. And so I find the first phase of it is much more of me engaging and like really pushing for the engagement. Once it's established and they start to see the value in the engagement, then it's like, hey, when are we meeting next? Hey, when are we? And so all of a sudden they're now coming and pushing my team a little bit more, and even pushing me, like even in between our regular, I try to meet with each of the execs that I partner with on a monthly basis. And we have something called a portfolio review. Every month we sit down and say, what is all the different initiatives above the red line that we're working on as a global IT organization? That's what I call my group, right? And so we go through that list, and for them, it's great. They get a full view with their direct staff on everything going on in the world in that partnership. And so they have now started to really reach out to my team because they want to get things on the list. They want to move things up and down the list. And so they're engaged now, right? They're engaged. But at first it's more me pushing into that. So I do think you have to establish the program and you have to establish the engagement model.
Cool, thanks.
Sure.
I think it's Peter next.
Sorry, I was on mute. Hi, Eric.
Hi, Peter.
I'm Peter. I'm Peter Caldas, and I'm the IT manager here at GitLab, and I'm based in the San Francisco Bay Area. My question for you is, part of our role means bringing change into the company, but people in general don't like change. So how do you manage this and get buy-in when there's resistance from end users?
Yeah, remember my earlier comment, you're a consultant, right? Everyone put on your consultant hat. And one of the key tools that you need to have as a consultant is you've got to understand how to do change management. I don't care what role you have in the organization, in your IT organization, you have to have the skill of change management. Doesn't mean you have to be perfect at it, but you need to understand it. And so I think change management, what I find many times are people, a lot of times will assume the worst. And the reason they assume the worst is because many times we don't communicate very effectively on what it is we're changing, why we're changing it, what the impact's going to be, what are the benefits going to be, right? And so I think one of the things I always find in that whole thing around change, and believe me, I've had to institute a lot of change I've been at SurveyMonkey a year, and I spent the first couple months just listening, and then I built the engagement, and then we started to make change. And it's a constant evolution. And I always tell people, change is not bad. It doesn't always have to make it's many times change is good, and change is always going to happen, whether we like it or not. It's part of the process. It's change. Change is going to always be there. But then when we sit down and have specific conversations around what we're changing, I always sit down with the business, always sit down with the partners we have, and especially the groups most impacted, and sit down and walk through in a very transparent way, here's the change we're making. Here's the impact to your organization. Here's why I think it's important that we make this change. Here are the benefits of this change. Here's what you can expect. Do you have any questions? And all of a sudden, the level of stress starts to go down. It doesn't go down like that, but it slowly starts to come down. And guess what? Sometimes there's change. We're doing a big security project right now. It requires change. And some people are on board and some people are not on board. But it wasn't because I didn't go through that process. People are very well educated on why we're doing it, what we're doing, the impact, and the value. Sometimes some people just don't want the change. And that's okay too, right? So it doesn't stop me from making the change, but I feel like I've done everything I can to prepare the organization for the change. So I think if you're looking for everyone to buy in all the time, you're gonna fail. You can't do that. What you can do is make sure you do everything possible to educate folks about what's coming and why and how and the impact.
So no surprises and set expectations, basically.
Yeah, I mean, let me ask you, how do you want change brought to you? Do you want it just done to you? Right? Think about, I always flip the script. Always. Every time I'm doing something, I'm like, how would I react to this? Would I be pissed off? Would I be frustrated? If the answer is yes, then obviously I'm missing something. So flip the script on yourself, Peter. I would say, how would you react the way you're communicating, the way you're doing change management? If you don't like what you would, if you feel like you would react poorly, you probably are missing something, and you need to tune that a little bit, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great question. Yeah, no problem. Brian, come on.
Hi, Rick.
We have tougher questions than this.
Well, maybe Alicia will
Okay.
will give you a tough one. We'll see.
All right, I'm ready.
We'll see if this is a softball here or not. So,
Oh man.
my name is Alicia Hansen, and I am in beautiful, sunny Minnesota, and I have our procurement function here at GitLab in Brian's team. And so my question, shifting gears just slightly to external partnerships, I would love to get your thoughts on what makes a procurement team a great trusted partner from an IT perspective and partnership perspective. I'd love your thoughts on working with procurement and what's made it really impactful for you.
I think procurement is incredibly important to an IT organization. IT tends to be one of the biggest, if not the biggest, always purchasers of technology inside the company. At least it should be. They should be overseeing what people are buying at least. And I think that relationship with procurement is super important. I think the thing that where procurement adds a lot of value is, and this is sort of my approach to vendors and partners. And when we're talking about the external world, my first thing is I sit down with the procurement team and say, hey, I just want to make sure we're on the same page, and I want to calibrate, like, how do we see vendors and partners? What's the definition? Vendor is coin operated. They show up once a year with their renewal, and then you never see them again. And those are folks that I can give or take. I could care less. The partners are the ones that show up, I buy something from, and then they're always looking for opportunities to help me get more out of what I already purchased. They're not showing up to sell me more stuff all the time. They're actually looking to help me out. And I think getting on the same page with procurement, that it's not just let's buy something, it's we need to manage the vendors and the partners. But more importantly, we need to manage the partners, and we need to sort of figure out who a partner and who a vendor is. And so I think the role of procurement is more than just helping negotiate a contract and doing RFPs and RFIs and negotiating terms and conditions. I believe they can add a hell of a lot more value in driving kind of that whole vendor management program. You know, who's a partner, QBRs with your top spend partners. Are we getting the value we should be getting out of the partners and the solutions we've purchased? And so I feel that procurement can be a real strategic part of an IT organization if it sort of has that approach. If it's just moving paper back and forth, I don't know if I put a lot of value on it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Good feedback.
Hey, Eric, this is Christopher Nelson. I'm a longtime fan of your career.
Christopher Nelson, how are you?
I'm doing very well.
Good,
here in Austin, Texas.
Great to see your smiling face, Christopher.
Hey, thanks so much. So let's talk about difficult conversations. I think that, you know, when you start engaging a new business and you start bringing the value of IT, but also the rigor of IT, how do you deal with a business partner where you have the experience and you can see how something's going to play out and they're going to be obstinate? I think that's important for everyone to hear. Yeah.
That is God, I knew you were going to ask me a tough question. I should have known. I don't know if I have a secret formula for this. I think a lot of it is bringing your experience to bear and say, I do this a lot, which is, you know, I've seen it done this way and this way and this way. And here were the results, pros and cons of doing it these three different ways. The way you're suggesting is not something I've traditionally seen work. And I feel that that's probably not something that I'm going to support. And then it gets into a conversation around, you know, if you're willing to take that risk, you're going to have to sign off and own it. right? Because that's not my experience, and that's not something that I feel that I can support. I think I find in these conversations too, when there is conflict, the first one that gets emotional is losing. You just don't want to go there. And I have seen people get really spun up, and it becomes like this. It becomes this almost, it goes from having a logical discussion and a business discussion to almost like people taking offense and getting emotional about it. And so I always tell my staff, like, this is not an emotional conversation. Just use facts. You can use your experience, you can use facts, and you lay that on the table. And sometimes it really works well, right? Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes people are like, it's my way or the highway. And my first reaction to that is, okay, I've laid out what I have seen work in my experience, because that's what I get paid for, is my experience, and bringing that to bear and running the team and doing the job. And if you choose to do that, I just want you to understand in writing, very clearly documented, that these are the types of things that I'm concerned about if you go down this road. And at some point, sometimes people are going to take that road, and sometimes they're successful and sometimes they're not. But I don't think there's a silver bullet for it. I think all you can do is be non-emotional, fact-based, and bring that data to bear on what you're proposing and why. And sometimes people are going to buy it and some people aren't. And sometimes you can play the escalation game. At my level, you usually don't play the escalation game because there's not much to escalate to, because you're going to the CEO, right? So you don't tend to want to air your dirty laundry in front of the CEO. But I think for folks in this call, I think that's where an escalation is probably appropriate to say, hey, we've reached an impasse. Here's sort of what I'm recommending. Here's what they're recommending, and then have a dialogue maybe one step above. Christopher, how'd I do?
You did good.
Okay, buddy. Thank
I
you.
want to add one thing to that as well, and I know that Eric does this. Having difficult conversations is a skill. You know, it is something you actually have to work at, and it requires retrospective sort of conversations. And back to the network that you have, and this could be, you know, with your peers, outside, you know, confidants, you know, have those conversations around, hey, this is how this conversation went, and here's an outcome that I didn't like. Admittedly, you know, lots of times it's about, you know, how did you respond to the difficult situation? Did you get emotional? Were you on point? Can you help the other person have that difficult conversation? You know, like calling it out. I would really urge everybody that it is a skill and requires practice. And you want to be looking for those difficult conversations that are easier to begin with. And as you continue to grow your career, you have more and more of those conversations, and you can't shy away from them. You've got to lean into them. Yeah. So I go to Eric all the time. Go ahead, Eric.
No. I think Brian, I think you're spot on, which is, I think it's a great sort of takeaway of that whole conversation, which is simply sitting there passively and not speaking up. Shame on you. Like, if you're paid for your opinion, and you need to make sure it's voiced in a constructive, collaborative, non-emotional way. But you're not going to grow as a professional if you tend to shy away from having that hard conversation. And I have seen staff that I've had that just don't want to have that conversation. And guess what the result is? A terrible outcome, because they knew the right answer, they just didn't want to say it. And to me that's unacceptable, and it's frustrating, because I hire smart people and they have a great idea, and they don't want to have to engage in that sort of dialogue. But that's part of our jobs as consultants, right? To say, hey, here's a better way of doing this. And when I talk about bringing data and facts to the table, another great data and another great way to gather some facts is, what are your peers doing? Christopher knows a bunch of people. Rob Parker knows a bunch of people. Brian knows a bunch of people. People on this call know a bunch of people. Find out from your peers, like, what are they doing? How are they doing? And nothing's more powerful than saying, hey, you know, the team over at SurveyMonkey, they're doing it, same sort of problem, they're doing it this way. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but it's a data point that provides a little bit of credibility to the conversation. So I would definitely leverage that, because I use that a lot.
Awesome. Hey, we're down to we have time for one more question, and Parl has a great one for you. Parl, you want to verbalize your question?
Yeah, sure. So what's been your most memorable career experience and how did it help you grow?
My most memorable career experience. Geez, that's a great question. I think it was early in my career, really, really early in my career. And I don't know if it was memorable because it was great. It was memorable because it was career changing. And I think what it was to me was I had come from a long career in consulting. So I worked at Deloitte at one point in my career for about 6 years and really learned a lot there. And as a consultant, when you're an outside consultant, you go in, you fix problems, you deliver stuff, but you never have to stick around for the results, the after effect, right, of maintaining and managing something. You just deliver it and you leave. And I had that mentality around delivering and then moving on. So I was much more focused on delivery, but not so much how it was being delivered, but that it was delivered. So it was all about results. And I had a boss who's still a CIO in the Valley, a guy named Tony Young, who I think is fantastic. And Tony gave me really good advice because I was coming into a company no longer as a consultant, but actually as a full-time employee. And we had delivered this really big project. And I was just like, let's get it done, like hard charging, go, go, go. But I wasn't thinking about the how. I just thought about the what, like we were getting this done and we delivered it. But what came after that was the entire staff was like, I don't want to work with that guy again. He's drives people too hard. He's concerned about getting to the task and the timeline. And so I guess the takeaway here, and this was a turning point in my career, and that's sort of why I bring it up, is it was like, hey, you need to rethink the way, not only how you deliver, it's not only that you deliver, but how you deliver was really important. And so I leave that with you because we as professionals, sometimes we want to drive to get things done. You got to think about how you're doing it. Are you bringing people along with you? Are you being balanced around how you're doing things and still getting to the result? And so that was a defining moment in my career. I would definitely have not been successful in my career if first of all, if Tony hadn't given me that good advice, and if I hadn't taken that advice to heart and really thought through, shit, I've got to change the way I'm operating here. I still want to deliver stuff, but I also got to think about, how I'm delivering stuff. And so I just sort of, that was a big turning point for me. And I've given that feedback to a number of my staff over the years, just around being thoughtful around how you deliver it. Because you have a team after that project that you need to work with on the next project. And sort of how you treat them and how you operate is going to impact your ability to be successful long term.
Eric, I really want to thank you. Yeah, sorry, Parul, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying thanks. That's a good advice. I always think about that.
All right, we're at time. Eric, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a great conversation, and we really appreciate your insights, wisdom that you can provide us. So thank you very much. We're going to end it here, folks, and we're looking forward to the next one. Thanks again so much. Bye, everybody.
Thanks,
Have a great
Brian.
day.
See you guys.
Thank you.